ladies and gents. If you haven't figured it out yet, yes, I am the Nimble Warrior. And yes, my book is on sale right now just for shipping and handling. If you go to thenimble.warriorbook.com, you can get a copy just for you. I'll even freaking sign the thing for just shipping and handling. So head to thenimble.warriorbook.com, grab yourself a book, get it autographed, and I'll send that book to you and you'll get it lickety split. And then you can start getting nimble. Man, isn't that freaking awesome? You'll be able to move better. You'll be able to have less injuries and you'll just feel better. Man, it's just simple as that. It's a short book, easy read, 80 something plus pages. And before you know it, man, you'll be moving and grooving and doing all the things that you used to do back in the day when you're a hard charging 20-year-old. Okay. But you don't have to be old to freaking read the book either. You can be a young, hard charging troop getting ready to get after it. This is injury prevention. This is the stuff that would have kept me in the military and showing you guys how to keep getting after it. So guys, head to thenimble.warriorbook.com. Love to get as many people with that book, signing as many copies as possible. And today we've got Mark Conn. Man, me and Mark are good pals and we're members of the Canadian Armed Forces together, namely the Canadian Grenadier Guards, and was proud to have helped train him back in the day, and now he's spread his wings and he's doing his own shit on his own and crushing it in the tech world, and had a wicked career so far in the Canadian Armed Forces, and with close protection and being a sergeant and being a leader, and just super proud of this guy, and had to have him on the show and talk about what the transition has been like from the military into civvy world. So without further ado, here we go. Mark Conn up on the Hard to Kill podcast.
Welcome to the Hard to Kill podcast, the go-to podcast for military, LEO, and EMS professionals, sharing ideas and experiences from around the world to make you hard to kill. Here's your host, Dave Morrow.
So 3, 2, 1. All right, ladies and gents, we are sitting down with Mark Conn. Mark's a good buddy of mine. We go way back to, Mark, was it 2008, 2009?
2007 I joined.
Oh,
yeah, but
snap.
I think we worked in like 2008.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll have to bring up our first interaction was down in the junior ranks mess. And I don't know if you want to fill in the listeners as to the interaction, because when you reminded me of it, it was pretty hilarious. But Mark, do you care to fill in our first interaction?
I don't know if I remember the exact one you're talking about. So maybe you got to take the lead on this.
All right. Okay, cool. Okay. So the one I remember is I was tending bar as PMC. And you just got the look in the JRs. We don't address everybody by rank here. It's much more relaxed. Just enjoy yourself and, come down whenever you got a chance, man. Like, you're part of the club now. And so you, I guess, really took that to heart. You're like, yes, finally a place where I could be myself. And you broed me. You're like, yo, bro, can I get a beer? And I was like, whoa, okay, kid, you got this whole message all misconstrued. I am not your bro, first of all. And yeah, I'll get you your beer, but you better check yourself. And it was just like, all right. But you reminded me of that. So, that's how you told it to me.
I definitely remember that now. And you probably remember the shock and awe in my eyes at that point. Again, just feeling like I was getting comfy, but all of a sudden was no longer comfy. So I definitely remember that.
Yeah, and a little bit of torque.
And I carried forward that attitude with the next guys once I became the big dog in the mess. So
yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely. I'm glad I was able to pay it forward. That's awesome. But now, obviously the student has become the teacher. You got a pretty impressive career. I shouldn't say completed because you're still in. So why don't you tell everybody kind of your backstory and why you're on the podcast, man?
Yeah, sure. So I joined back in 2007, and my first real thing was with you doing the Cambrian patrol. So
that was just this awesome experience I got to do as like a private or a guardsman, you would say, in our regiment, where we kind of, we went into this high performance team, and went to Wales and basically did like an SAS level patrol that we trained for like a year with a bunch of really good dudes. So that kind of kicked off the career in the right direction. And then over the years I was doing university, I was doing a lot of reserves. It's kind of one of those funny things where when people, outsiders wonder about the reserves, they don't really know what that entails. But I was basically it was like an all you can eat buffet for me. So when I wasn't in school, I was just eating. And, I would go even on weekends. It was like, I remember, me and you were there, we were be doing almost like 2 or 3 weekends a month. Sometimes we'd be taking 2 weeks off in the middle of a semester to go and do like that mountain warfare thing with the Van Deus. So every summer it was just a lot of army and then school at the same time, and trying to balance that whole thing. So yeah, eventually I did my master corporal's course pretty quickly. So I got into the leadership role, started being a section commander, learned a ton just through doing it, and we'll talk more about this later, but the actual leadership training and culture in the military was amazing. And then actually getting to lead guys for a few years there. And then basically I heard about close protection, and that's sort of this, it's a special unit, it's a special task. You have to volunteer for it. It's quite difficult to get in. There's pre-selection, there's selection, and that involves going away for a week and being evaluated while they put you through physically and mentally the ringer, like any kind of selection for a high level team. So I had a really good foundation when I showed up for that, and we can get more into that kind of detail. But I succeeded in selection. I succeeded on the course. I actually had to do the course twice because I totally destroyed my shoulder doing a hammer fist punch on the first time around. And it was nasty because I literally punched my shoulder into oblivion, and it was I had to go home and come back and do it again. So
was this for training? I can't remember the story. Was it for training, or was this
so
were you raging out like?
No, training, man. We had this guy, when I was doing that first close protection course, we're down in Blackwater, and the guy, so part of the course is like an unarmed combat, or they call it defensive training. And they had these two cops running it. These two, they were like ex-cops from Alabama, and they were like awesome dudes. They knew tons and tons of stuff. They were also a little crazy. And they weren't exactly running a by the book training course. Like the safety was not there. And to be honest, there was times we were bare knuckle boxing in there. And I think they were just like, holy shit, these guys are fucking crazy, and let's push them to their limits. And we were legitimately doing that. So that sort of is the context of this course. And then towards the end of that particular training, we were doing the hammer fist, which is just like a really bad position to put your shoulder in. You have your fist over your head, you're above your shoulder, and you're hammering down. It's a really vulnerable position for your shoulder. And they were pushing us to go harder and harder. And I literally hit so hard, this guy holding a pad, that my shoulder popped out. And I definitely tore the ligaments right there. So I had to go to the hospital, get it put back in. I had to get sent home from course. I had to recover. I had to do physio, and then I had to come back and redo the whole thing. So that's when the second time I did the CP course, and I passed that. Now my shoulder wasn't 100% healed. We'll find that out later. But so I did the CP course, got the qualification, and then I was basically waiting for a tour. And they're not easy to get. This is a very small team. There was only really one team deploying at a time in Canada at that point. So, you have a team coming from the Western Canada, then you have like the Ontario rotation, then you have the Quebec rotation. So I basically was biding my time waiting to do this tour. I think I had done my sergeant's course before. Anyways, I got the tour, went to Kabul, did 9 months on the close protection team there. So we were doing close protection for the Canadian ambassador in Kabul, who was a woman. Her name was Deborah Lyons. She was phenomenal. And that was, I got really lucky on that tour. I had a really great team. Everybody came home. The only injury was me with my shoulder again. on the last 3 weeks of that tour, I was literally whipping a football and it popped out again because it never really healed.
Brutal.
So I had to go to a natal hospital and they had to get it back in. That was a big struggle too. So I came home with an injury on a medical category. I had a year of Class C to kind of recover. And I did operations work at the regiment and I got my surgery. And then during that time, I was thinking about what my next steps were. And I was actually looking at, government roles in intelligence. I was thinking about a lot of different things. And I actually stumbled upon this coding boot camp. So, learn how to be, a software developer. And it kind of hit me like a wall. And, you can spend a lot of time in the military and you could be really into it and you could be killing it. But then you got to realize that there's other facets to your personality. There's other parts of you that you're sort of forced to neglect. And for me, I have a creative side. I have an engineering mind. And when I saw that opportunity, I kind of knew right then and there that I wanted to pursue that and give that a shot and try something else. And so I just went full steam ahead. And I happened to be, there was two other good friends of mine who were both in the reserves, Kitching and Perks. And, I spoke to them about this idea and I think they got hit by the same revelation that they wanted to do it. So, the three of us just kind of put the Army on the back burner and we started learning code and we contacted the school and, we got accepted and we got in there and we did this really intensive 2-month course. So that was my introduction to the software industry. And most people know that there's an extreme demand for software developers. Like if you're,
Right.
We're living in Montreal now. That's probably the biggest driver of the city's industry or the city's economy, if you will, is software, right? We have a huge gaming industry here. We have a big software and it just keeps kind of growing. So
Huge
when I got out of this,
porn. Don't forget the porn industry.
Oh yeah. I got a buddy at MindGeek. They're huge, massive. No pun intended. And with me, I still was in the military. I was doing some recruit training and some stuff. I had I was at this point, I'm saying no to more offers to go on tour. I'm getting emails, I'm getting phone calls. They want me to go back or try different missions as close protection. And I'm thinking to myself, like, maybe one day, but definitely not now. Like I have to, take off in this career. So yeah, and that it's been about 3 years since I started doing that. So yeah, that's kind of like my intro. And, I guess we're going to be talking about that whole transition and
no doubt
between it and the skill sets and all that I'm bringing over.
100%. We've got a bit of a generational gap between me and you. Not too much, but like, so my internet game's not the best. But if I say like, learn to code, is it that has some hidden meaning now, doesn't it? Isn't there like some sort of, was there something there where like is that some racist shit now? Like what's going on with learn to code?
Yeah. So it's like, I think it's back from people in our time, as far as when people's jobs getting automated, right? So a lot of people in different industries are getting pushed, they're getting maybe automated out of their jobs. And then there's, this popular sort of meme for a while was like, hey, go and learn to code. And honestly, I don't think it's a bad sentiment. That's kind of like saying, if you lived in the era of the gold rush, you're telling someone, hey, go learn how to mine gold or whatever. Like you're giving them good advice because right now is the equivalent. It's the software gold rush. So learning to code is a great idea, but it's become offensive because it sort of brushes off those problems that they're experiencing and maybe they're not able to learn to code. And, having done it now, I don't necessarily think it's for everybody. Just like mining gold was probably not for everybody, right? But
right.
So it's kind of, I think saying learn to code can get you like banned from Reddit now or something.
Yeah. I saw something similar and I was like, okay, I'm really not in the loop. How does saying go learn to code translate into like getting banned on a social platform? But apparently that's
relatively new, Yeah.
Okay, so I'm still with it. I'm still with it somewhat with the internet
exactly.
and the kids these days. Okay, sweet.
Sure.
So you learned how to code. I don't know the first thing about coding. I worked at a tech company for 3 months and looking at their screens gave me anxiety. I failed my coding 201 in McGill as my elective. I was like, cool, I'm going to learn how to code. And I was learning how to code HTML.
Right.
And that was like, I think if you had said, look, I'm giving you a week, learn all like the different characters of the Chinese alphabet, I would have been like, cool. And like put a sentence together. I would have been like, yeah, I can figure this out. You gave me the coding stuff. There's something about my brain that was like, you can't do this. You're not smart enough. There's something that's blocking. Tell me what you do specifically. And like, how do you manage all that text and like and get
Mhm.
after it?
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing, because I feel like any human beings, like my opinion is that any human that first looks at code is going to be punched in the face the way that you were with the HTML. Like for real. I mean, I think people like to believe, and there's definitely going to be people out there that are just have a natural aptitude for it, maybe. Um, but I think the majority of us, and especially even guys like me who are in the industry now and are doing well, like you get punched in the face very hard by this kind of introduction to code, and it can be so overwhelming. And very, very frustrating in your learning process. And everyone that I was with learning was like overwhelmed, frustrated, feeling inadequate. People to this day who have been working in the industry for years still feel like imposters. They still feel like they don't actually know what they're doing. So how do you end up succeeding in it is it's a bit of a game of forgiving yourself. And my instructor told us, the guy who ran this code school, he's like, look, I have to beat this into your heads over time. I could show you something right now. You can nod your head and you'll get it, but you'll forget it in an hour or you'll forget it tomorrow. So I have to beat it into your head repeatedly. So you really have to do that. You have to like learn the same concept over and over and over until it starts making sense. And then over time, certain gears start to click into place, and you actually start getting a real foundation and understanding. And eventually reading the code is like reading a book, or it looks like English to you, especially with a language that's comfortable. But that initial onslaught, or that initial amount of complexity, is probably the hardest thing to get over. And yeah, I think that's like, there's a lot of attrition in the industry. And I think a lot of attrition of comp sci students, could be just the stress of feeling inadequate, or feeling like you don't understand what's going on. That's a big thing for sure.
That's wild. So to go on a little tangent, you're physically coding and like whatever it is, like I couldn't even give you an example, like, hey, what do you code? But like looking down the road, like 10, 15 years, is there going to be a replacement of human coders? Like is there going to be a way for like AI to be like, oh yeah, I can figure that out and code it, and then it's made, and then like you no
Yeah.
longer have a job? Like, is that a reality that you guys are worried about as well?
Yeah, that's something that's even happening now. People are, it's funny because the people that are building those products it's AI that codes, those are basically people, those are coders that are coding themselves out of a job.
That's
In
wild, man. That's
theory.
so crazy when you think
Yeah.
about it. That's crazy.
Yeah, I know, it's absurd, because, well, basically you end up working for a company, and whoever owns that company, the CEO, is like, well, my product is going to be code that is written by AI, and I'm going to hire some guys to write it, and he gives them salaries, and then they sit there and they code themselves out of a job. There are some products out there that are already doing that. But I think the debate in the industry is like, look, when you talk about AI writing code, are you talking about a replacement, or are you talking about a really awesome tool that'll help the software developer rather than replace them? And that's a debate about a lot of automation, right? Like, the books I've been reading, like, I don't know if you know Yuval Harari. He has a book called Homo Deus. He talks
Yep.
about like, the future of a lot of things, but to do with AI. And in his vision, it's like you have a detective and he has an AI partner, and you have like the human AI partnership. So, I guess a more positive outlook for software would not necessarily be that everyone's replaced per se, but that we would be really enhancing our workflow with AI assistance, but it definitely is perilous. I mean, nobody is safe, and coders definitely aren't safe from being replaced. And if you don't constantly keep up and learn the more in demand coding skills that maybe can't be replaced, or then you could get, yeah, if you stay like if you're just going to do some basic stuff and stick with that and never learn anything new, yeah, you'll probably get washed out of the industry for sure.
So basically, it's kind of like we were talking about, to touch base on Yuval Harare. I haven't read his book yet, but it's been recommended a bunch of times. Actually, the last episode, Kelly Starrett, he was like, "Yeah, you got to read this book." It sounds like an Isaac Asimov, like iRobot style world that's coming. Is that? I don't know. Like that shit really interests me. Actually, part of the reason why I'm doing this now instead of teaching in a classroom is the writing's on the wall. It's only a matter of time before a lot of the stuff ends up being automated, and the feeling I have is like I got to get ahead of the curve, and I got to make I got to make a change, get into the online space, whether it's scary or not. Get in there because if not, I saw it in teaching profession. What I'm doing now, I've become a significantly better teacher just by getting in front of a camera, doing micro lessons, and then delivering the content in a different way. Like, why didn't I do this when I was actually a teacher? Like when I was in a classroom, this would have been so much more effective. I could have just been like, all right, kids, here you go. Did you get your micro lesson? Cool. And it's literally what I would do during the class. Just that takes so long in the class because you gotta be like, hey, like, shut up. Hey, you stop getting up.
Yeah.
Hey, you, and it just,
well, exactly. You're half babysitting, but also you weren't really in an innovative space, and I would kind of compare that maybe to some problems we can talk about with the military, but you're not in an innovative environment. So Yuval basically says in that book that he's like, the biggest stress factor and something government should be preparing for is that people are going to become really stressed out by constantly having to learn new skills. Our fathers, like, they learned one skill set, they would work at their company for 40, 60 years, they retire. And in our lifetime now, like even me and you, we've gone through a lot of transitions in our careers, and he thinks that's going to only accelerate because you might spend, or let's put me for example, I spend this time learning how to code, I go and become a software developer for X amount of years, and then all of a sudden I don't have a job anymore because the AI is writing the code. Now I have to go back and learn some other skill that the AI can't do yet, and I learned that one and I do it for a few years, and then boom, that one gets replaced. That's what he sort of thinks is going to happen. Like, we're going to be having to constantly reinvent ourselves, and that's going to bring on a level of stress, and like we need to get ahead of that. Like the government needs to sort of step up and
that's actually another book that has been brought up a few times, called Range by David Epstein, where the like uber generalist, they're the ones that are going to be the most dominant because you're going to have your foot, or I guess your hand in many different cookie jars, and so therefore you're going to be able to solve a lot more problems rather than being a hyper specialist. Like they're even saying like radiologist, man, like that's super specialized, but like you can have a computer do it, and that's kind of freaky when you think about it, because like you said, like our parents' generation, you get one job, you stick with it, you see it through, and you get super good at it, and you work up the ladder. You're about to transition out, I think, from the forces, and then like I'm already out. And I've been in teaching, I've been in tech industry, now I'm doing my own thing, got my own company, I'm doing podcasts. Like it's for me, I like this, but I can imagine if you're a specialist and all of a sudden it's like, you're not gonna have a job in 4 years, what are you gonna do? The stress that would impose on somebody would be lights out. It'd be like, I'm 35. I'm 35. Sure. I can't do this anymore. Like I could see that being a real issue.
Yeah. And I like to think of myself as more of a generalist, sort of in a specialist's field, but that's 100%. Like I'm always looking forward to, or looking to the future to see like where I can pivot to next, and I don't want to be just that one trick pony, because I think it's going to be perilous.
Yeah, for real. So how do you see your military experience translating into your civvy work right now, coding? Like has that, all that leadership training and all that experience, on tour and stuff like that, how's that really affected you in your civvy world?
So first of all, I mean, it's helped tremendously in gaining a certain amount of attention. So at the very onset of, getting out of this school, the first thing that happens is you kind of meet with a lot of recruiters or people at these companies, and it sets you apart right away from the rest of the people in my cohort. So, we were 20 people that graduated, sort of different and in many ways more valuable having that military experience. And that's just a perception thing. Like, people really do take notice of that. And it was like a tangible advantage. So that's sort of getting the attention is one thing. Once you sort of get in the door, one of the skills that really helped is kind of the aptitude for direct communication and conflict. And I should preface this by saying, like, I don't think everyone in the military has that aptitude. This is through my own lens and perspective. And I did infantry leadership, close protection. These are all kind of hard charging trades. So, it's not a blanket statement necessarily about military skill sets, but as a certain perspective or certain slice of the military that I was in, I think gave me these skills or helped elaborate them. But so that ability for direct communication and conflict. So it didn't help me write code per se, but it helps you when you sit down in meetings and, you can hear bad ideas and you can express why they're bad ideas and you can see deficiencies and, your ability to just tell people straight up what you think and clearly communicate, and that's something I had to develop in my military experience, especially in close protection. Like, my job was to go and meet all these Afghans and meet, and you did something similar too. And you're meeting with all these different people and you're just communicating all the time. You're cutting deals and you're talking directly, no bullshit, so that's sort of, that skill set was tremendously helpful. And also that sort of assertiveness and that team building and leadership mentality. A lot of people in software, they can sometimes meet the stereotype. They might be a little quieter. They might be a little bit more conflict avoidant. That's definitely true of a lot of people out there. And so if you're not like that, and if you have like a louder personality and you're more assertive and you're more direct, like that really sets you apart. Starts giving you a lot of advantages, right? So yeah, I think those are like the big ones right away,
Yeah, no doubt. And you know what, like, having been out, but not in, not in the, like you said, the innovative space, being a teacher, you're not really called upon for the same kind of things, right? And there's no real progression. It's your teacher or you become a principal. So that was the most frustrating thing for me, is that my input wasn't all that needed. So on your end though, that's a cool perspective, because I think in most corporate boardrooms, candor and having the ability to be like, with all due respect, sir, like that doesn't make any sense, and I'm going to tell you why. I think that goes a long way, and that's something that we're encouraged to do, right? Like, whenever we went on like an op and we had like a con op, whatever, before we're heading out, it was okay. We'll go around the room, like it didn't matter, because we're going out light, we're going out at like a 10-man debt, so
yeah,
it'd be like, okay, from private to LT captain, whatever. Anybody have anything to say? Has anybody noticed anything? And that, I think, is because we're used to it. When we get out and we realize, oh, that's not how most places operate, because the boss is the boss and this is the way we're going to do it. And then even if they ask questions, it's kind of like, well, you're not really expected to be that dude that kind of pushes back and says no. But then again, if you do, like you said, it probably puts you in a pretty good position. Like I don't know how your corporate structure works, but I imagine you've been given more responsibility just by virtue of you being able to speak your mind and be truthful, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. There's a few things there. It's like, so one of the things I think you have to learn in the military, especially when you go on a tour, you're in a high performance team where things can be like life and death, is that like you have to investigate your own thoughts. And when you do speak back to your leader, like if I would speak back to my team leader and tell him something was sketchy or his idea might not be great, I had to do a lot of my own self investigation to make sure there was no holes in my argument. You don't just blurt out the first thing that comes to your head. You have to, or else, you look stupid, you lose trust. So you have to actually say meaningful things that you've evaluated yourself with a lot of critical thinking, and then you communicate it. So that sort of ability is great too, because then when you get in this, when you get in this boardroom meeting or whatever, when you come up with an argument, it's usually pretty sound. You haven't just said the first thing that pops in your head, and that helps because you can defend your point. And the other thing is, like we were saying, like being assertive or being, seeking conflict, or if you will, for the better. There's a lot of people that think that that's a bad idea, and that's fascinating, because from what I see of the corporate jungle, we could talk more about that after, but literally, like, seeking conflict is like the path to success. Like you're really not handed anything for free. You kind of have to veer out of your lanes to get anywhere. And that's like a key difference, where when I think about, the time in the military, it was like, you get a job, like you're rifleman 3 at first of this section or whatever, and you just, like, you're sort of given hardship, and you kill it or you don't, and you're recognized when you do really well. And then your leaders sort of have that responsibility to recognize, like, who's my best troops, like, why are they good, and they kind of, like you did with me, like you took notes on my performance, and you helped me, you sort of pushed me up to my next step because you saw that I was ready. And part of that in the army is kind of staying in your lane at certain times. Like, had I gone above your head and gone over to the platoon commander and started talking shit to him, you would have been like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, this is
Who's this
not
Conn?
like,
Who's this Conn
this is
asshole?
not constructive for anybody.
First of all, he's calling me bro
Yeah.
and asking for a
And,
beer, and now he's talking to the LT behind my back. Not cool. Not cool.
Exactly. Yeah, totally stupid. Like, it would be counterproductive for me, for my career. You would have had a shit fit. But in civvy land, veering out of your lane and going the next level up and going above your manager's head, that can actually be a really good idea. I see people doing that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
That's called, like, they call that initiative. And yeah, it's pretty wild, man. Like, you really you succeed by veering out of your lanes almost as wildly as you possibly can. So you're like, it's, yeah, and I'm only really starting to realize this, in the past sort of year or so, how valuable that is. And especially now I'm in, like, this kind of big corporations, so a lot of that, and it's pretty interesting. So yeah, back to the whole point of being assertive and seeking conflict. And then there's this other sort of class of people that are in there, and I know it's unfortunate, but some people really just keep their heads down and they stay quiet, and they kind of hope for the best, and it's not helping. It's definitely not helping them in this atmosphere.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, like that just talks to, like, it's just humans in general, right? You're going to have that, like, 30% that are just out to get it,
Yeah.
and the other 70% will be satisfied. But it'll just, okay, well, this is my lot, and so be it. But just from what you're explaining, it sounds like being like a careening car wreck of an individual, just like smashing
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
That's your way to the top. It's like, I don't care who I hit, as long as I hit as many people as possible. I'll get enough eyeballs on me. They'll be like, "Who is this guy?"
Exactly.
Oh yeah, that's Mark. Yeah, he's a disaster. But you know what? I know his name. You know his name. Hey, he must be
Yeah.
doing something right. That's
No,
too.
100%, man. I mean, and it's so here's one of the hard parts about that, being a software guy. So, I'm in this company right now where it's, you have obviously a lot of developers, but you have other people too that are more managerial, and their job is more to, like, communicate across the company. So they'll be, their day to day is a lot of meetings, a lot of emails, a lot of, interfacing with people. Whereas software developer, you're interfacing with your computer most of the time, or not most of the time. You still have a lot of meetings and stuff with other developers, but you interface less across the company. Like, I tend to sort of only interact with my team and a few people outside of my team, like our internal users or whatever. So that's a detriment when you're a software developer. When you're not constantly interfacing with people, you're kind of losing ground to other people who are, like you said, they're getting to be known. They don't even necessarily have to be that good. They're just in people's face, and they become more memorable, by sort of even just relaying information back and forth. Like, a classic sort of conundrum for a software developer is, like, you're building this piece of software that's basically an automated task that's going to make the company a lot of money. You deploy a piece of code to the web, the users go on your new site, and now they're doing transactions, and the dollars you're just printing money with this piece of code you wrote. But are you going to see the recognition for that code and that value that you brought to the table? That recognition is going to get diluted up the chain, right? Because as a software developer, you're kind of like, you're on the front line, you're making this thing work, but above you is the product owners and the stakeholders and the various middle managers, et cetera. And they're going to take a lot of that credit for conceiving the idea, maybe. So you have to, as a software developer, you still have to fight for your own recognition a lot. And that's another interesting difference in the military. Like, I feel like you just get seen, right? Like, a section commander's job and the platoon commander's job and all these people, part of their job is to recognize good performers. Whereas in civvy land, you have to come up with your own Broadway act to display how performant you are. You will not
look
get
at me,
anywhere.
look at me. Yeah, if you jumping
100%, 100%. You will not, if you're the kind of guy or girl, or whatever, you just put your head down and you grind and you don't ask for a pat on the back and you just do it for the boys, as we would say in the Army. And there's a lot of good people like that. That unfortunately means jack shit. And that's sort of sad but true lesson that I'm also learning in the tech industry, at least, and it's probably plays the same way the other industries. It's like you need to create your own Broadway act to promote yourself.
That's a good point, man. I guess it goes against our natural inclination to be gray men. That's kind of like day one, right? Like when you're the gray man, especially early on, and when you get on your leadership course, the last thing you want to do is be the dude with the target on your chest. Do your job, keep your head down, be professional, help out the boys, no bragging, just get it done. And that's exactly, that's our culture, right? And that's what makes doing a lot of, and you touched on it, just getting out in the corporate world. That's what makes it tough, I think, because for me, the biggest thing when I started, like I was like, okay, I'm gonna start doing this training thing online. I have to be on Facebook all the time, putting shit on Facebook, videoing myself. And I had to get over that fear because I wouldn't have a business. And just doing what we're doing now, talking, is actually for, a lot of guys, they're nervous because of, well, I don't want to sound like I'm, bragging. Well, you're not, you're just literally explaining. But that is definitely a cultural thing that we are brought up with, because it fits the military, especially the Canadian Armed Forces, really well. We're just humble warriors. Yeah. But when you move outside of that world, man, I can see it being a real kick in it. Like, I don't know if you've had a hard time kind of speaking the language of corporate. That's been kind of, I had some help to get that pinned down, just what we've done and how to kind of translate that into civvy talk, and to make sure that, when you show up, the hardest thing is the loss of status, right? That, all of a sudden, it's like, you're Mark, you're not Sergeant Conn. You don't wear a uniform that denotes that you've got, like, you've done shit, and like, we've all done shit. And it just, when you show up, you're just like Dave, Mark, and that is a hard pill to swallow. So how did you kind of navigate that, when I'm sure you've had interaction with people where you're like, oh my God, I fucking can't stand you. Why don't you shut your mouth? Like, what have you done so far to kind of navigate that minefield?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's been tough. I mean, so there's kind of like a caveat. Like, a lot of people, even though you're Dave and you're Mark and you're not your rank anymore. People, they at least, they're like, oh, you used to be in the military, and they might not really get it, but they see something different. So you get a little bit of that. But so what that makes me think of is, like, it's the leadership gap, or this just chasm of the difference between, leadership and leadership culture in the military, leadership culture in civilian. And I want to say, like, I really, it's not about having ill things to say about the managers I've worked with or the people, the leaders in these companies, like I think 99% of these guys are pretty good people and they're doing their best. But I think the difference for me is like it's bush league and professional league when it comes to that leadership. And that's the struggle I feel. Yeah. When you become Dave or Mark, you're kind of, it feels in a sense like you're going from the NHL to the farm team, and you don't really have, it's like you're now in this place where you don't really have the ability to like even tell people like, you know, how fucked up maybe this leadership or management situation is, because it's a different language. I don't think, you know, a lot of people have nowhere near the same concepts that maybe you get from the military, right? Like, think about this, like, okay, you have a manager, most of the time a manager is especially low level. So let's compare a section commander in the infantry and that person's equivalent in like a tech company. You know, to become a section commander in the infantry, you have to do months and months of like dedicated training. You know, you go on a course to your mod 6 or whatever they have now, and now they have a sergeant's course too. So that's 2 courses for a total of maybe 4 months of almost 24/7 training, of theory, of practical. You're living and sleeping with the people you're training with. You have instructors on you all the time. You're getting evaluated in the field in the middle of the night. People are failing, you know, people are going down with injuries and exhaustion, and all this months of work just to say, okay, you're capable. You now understand the foundation of leadership. You're by no means a good leader yet, but you have enough to go and start trying to do it. And then you think that person's equivalent in a tech company is more like, hey man, the last guy just quit. You're going to be the manager now. Right. And then the guy's like, okay. And then he maybe gets like a PowerPoint or something, or he might get like a day. You know, I've heard managers tell me this. They're like, dude, I had like a day of like this online course and that was it. So these people are thrust into these positions and they just don't know what they're doing at all when it comes to leadership. But again, in that world, I don't even think that they realize what they're missing. It's not like most of them, you know, came from a superior leadership culture and were like, damn, man, this is really plummeted. Like me and you would see that. But if you've never been in that, you don't know what you're missing out on. You might think that leadership is just doing a PowerPoint and sending the right emails at the right time. And, you
don't know what you don't know. That's basically
yeah. So I've had to swallow my pride a lot, but I mean, you know, it's you always have to try and be positive, constructive. And instead of, you know, I don't want to carry any bitterness about the fact that I'm not in charge of all this stuff. You know, I'm in a new game now and I got to make my dues, but you know, it's something, it's a glaring difference. I think we both would agree on that, you know?
Oh yeah. And so I've told this story before, but just when I was teaching, it was so obvious that I'd really moved to the minor leagues when we're doing a science fair and they're like, hey Dave, can you get the coffee? And I was like, yeah, sure. They're like, okay, well, like, do you need any help? Like, it's just coffee. But it was like a big deal. It's like, oh, right. Yeah, cool.
But it's the coffee. You know,
but it's the coffee. Like, do you know where to get it? It's like, yep, I can do that. That's an unqualified private job, right? So that was like I was like 2-3 years in, and I was like, oh, right. That's my level now. Like that's where I operate. I operate at the coffee boy level. So it's definitely not, and that talks more to the loss of status, right? When you have that loss of status and you're not in that playing field anymore, it's hard to get there. And then you see people, you're like, you don't know anything, but then how can you blame them? They've never been taught. And that's where we come in as like, you know, experienced leaders, you know, like, you know, you've been doing it for over a decade. It's a soft skill, but man, it's hard to get down, and it takes so much practice. And I know I see it on LinkedIn all the time, like leadership. And yeah, leadership is crazy important. And you know, that's part of the reason why I have the podcast too, is that like just getting the word out that, you know, you want a leader in your organization. Well, if you're going to hire somebody that has leadership experience from the military, don't put them in like the low level entry level position, man. Like the level of leadership experience that we have is really, really high, and we can easily fit in to, mid or high level management position almost right out of the gate.
Yeah,
and it's just
for sure.
getting that concept across to employers is not always easy, and that's why there's other organizations that exist and stuff like that. So can I ask, like, are you on that track, man? Are you on the ladder? Like, are you slowly moving up that corporate ladder to eventually you'll be like having like cocktails on like the president of the company's yacht? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. So I would say I definitely am. I mean, I've been in software now for 3 years, like literally 3 years as of October. I've made big leaps in progress. So now I'm moving into what they call senior developer. And then once you're a senior, you kind of start, I've already taken like a lead role I kind of own like all the front end applications in my team. And I just like kind of spearheaded hiring a new junior. Yeah, I agree with you. It's like, if I was a business owner, and I care about my bottom line and I want to hire the best people for the best jobs, I would say too, yeah, like, you have all these guys in middle management and they definitely have a lot, guys or girls have a lot of skills in sort of this realm in tech, whatever. But, you can't discount like the actual time put in, like you said, like a decade, like the sheer hours you've put into leading and managing in the military. It's like, I agree with you, like that people with that experience in civvy land should be given the opportunity to go more directly into leadership roles and sink or swim, and let's see if it works. Then you're sort of bucking against the powers that be in this company, and I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't want to see that. I've been here for 5 years, and then Dave comes in and he's my boss. Why? Because he was in the army. It's like, you're fighting a little bit of that current as well too.
Yeah, hands down.
And I remember saying to someone I was talking to about that, I was like, man, I almost feel like that's the total opposite of what I would do. Like when I was on tour, when I didn't know what I was doing, I would say that because I'm covering my ass and I'm covering my team's ass. And if I'm not sure of something, I don't want to just pretend like that's fine. Let's just fake it till you make it. And then, someone could die from that. So
Mm-hmm.
you do not do that. When you have this sort of maturity as a leader to say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I need some help here. I need some collaboration, right?
Yeah.
And then with this sort of civilian leadership I've seen, it's like people are thriving really on not knowing what they're doing and hiding it and faking it till they make it. And they're thriving. And I don't really blame them because that's the world that we're in. That's that corporate jungle, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting, man.
What would you, for somebody, like ourselves, like, reservists, we're, getting out or are out and we're looking to make the jump into corporate, what would be kind of like your, if you could kind of distill it, what would be like a solid recommendation when taking on that job?
Mm-hmm. I would say the biggest thing for military people to, I think, realize about the corporate environment is, for me, it's don't stay in your lane. That's one of those things. There's a couple of things like that are detrimental as like a military person going into civvy land. Thinking that you need to stay in your lane, you don't. As, at least in my experience and my industry, like you're not doing yourself any favors by staying in your lane and waiting for your management to hand you opportunities. Like that's how it worked in the military, right? Like I'm killing it in my lane. I'm an awesome infantry soldier. Dave's going to give me a job doing the Canadian patrol or whatever, like that's sort of how you do it. But in civvy land, it's not so much that. If you sit in your lane and you do well, nobody gives a shit. And you shouldn't wait. You should not wait for that chain of command thing to start working like it did in the army. It's not at all the same. So you should veer out of your lanes. You should come up with your own projects and just start doing them. Even if they seem like they're like detrimental to the team, like, oh, I'm going to spend 3 hours a week on this project initiative of mine. And that's 3 hours I'm not doing my actual job. That's going to benefit you. You should do that. So yeah, don't just do the work that's assigned to you or do the work that seems to be assigned to you. You got to take your own time and just like do something innovative and has this initiative. And that's the only way you're going to be able to sell yourself to start getting these promotions.
Very cool.
And the other thing I was going to say is don't be afraid to switch companies. I've switched jobs like 3 or 4 times now in
Really?
3 years. Yeah. And each time, at least in tech, unfortunately, the recruiting budgets are way higher than the retention budget. So you'll often have recruiters coming at you with a significant raise that you will not be able to get from your company unless you play hardball. Like I've had managers tell me, listen, if you threaten to leave, we're going to give you more money, which is crazy.
That's crazy.
Right? They'll just straight up tell you that. And I'm like, are you serious? Are you seriously telling me this?
It's a very, very bad negotiation tactic.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. If you threaten to leave, like if you think I'm worth more, you should be pushing that onto me so I don't leave, because it might be too little too late. Right. And that's happened to me. Like I left a company once and they were like, oh, can we counter offer? And I was like, sorry, man, it's too late. And that's not enough of a counter offer. And it's just like, it's a little bit insulting because they right away, what that message is telling you is like, you've always been worth more than we're paying you, but we're not going to give you that until you threaten us. It's bizarre.
Yeah. And that's totally counter to what we're used to, right? Like,
yeah,
well, first of all, you don't have to like negotiate salary, which is a huge thing, but just to like always have to play one, and you're really out for yourself. And that's the biggest thing too, right? Like I noticed that from my brief time that I was in that corporate environment. I was like, oh shit, like I really got to market myself. And like you said, so like you got to do the song and dance, and you got to be the careening car at the same time, because you got to get paid at the end of the day. You got to take care of like for me, you got to mortgage, you got to take care of the kids and family and all that shit. So it's, if you're not, then guess what? The dude next to you is going to be grabbing your, bonus
and
that you're getting.
Exactly. Kind of different mentality of being on a team in the army. Like you live with these people, you patrol with them, you're in the trenches with them, like you're like just family with these people, love it or hate it. And it's like a much more tribal thing, and this tribal loyalty comes into play, like and that's why we have terms in the military like, oh, he's a blade, or he's a buddy fucker, he'll stab you in the back. Like those people, like you can't last too long being a blade in the army. And so that whole team tribal thing, forget about that, man. You're not even getting close to that in civvy side. You have a very loose camaraderie, very ephemeral camaraderie, if anything, with your friends and your coworkers. It's just totally different.
Yeah, check. Okay, so we touched at the very beginning, man. You mentioned the Cambrian Patrol. It's now exactly 10 years since we did that bad boy. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring it up because obviously for me that was a huge moment just in like my career, because it was right before I went on tour, and it was the first time that we actually got to like put together our own team, and from soup to nuts get everything organized. You guys were on it, you were on it, freaking like, and all of us have all ended up being relatively successful, both in the military, but also like outside of the military as well. Like it was such a, like you mentioned, like, the team and like being close to your buddies and the guys you work with, man. Like, I don't know, like I guess the expression I'm trying to say is like, it was greater than the sum of its parts, I guess, that whole experience. And if I could redo it again, holy shit. But like, for me, the biggest takeaway was, I'd never trained that hard in my life. Me and Simon would put something together, and then we did that, conveyed that to you guys as best as we could. So like from that experience, you mentioned a few times, like what was some of your takeaways?
Yeah, that experience was like really foundational, not only for me as for my military career, but for me as a person. I mean, it was so different what we did, me being on that team with you and Simon, and like compared to the other guys I graduated boot camp with, who just were, just what, it was nothing wrong with that, but they're just doing the regular infantry thing. And, we went on this team, and it's like, yeah, I had never pushed myself that hard. I wouldn't have imagined we could have done things like that, and ended up doing that patrol. So that really like shaped my outlook moving forward from that point. I don't think I would have maybe I don't think I would have really gone to close protection or thought I could do stuff like that without having done the canine patrol. And as far as like fitness and whatnot, like, and I never forgot it. It was an epic thing for me for sure.
Yeah, you know what? Like to have an experience like that as a leader, man, it was so. It was just I don't know if it's a once in a lifetime thing, but you know, like I've even talked about it. Like I ended up doing a talk for Domino's Canada, and like that was like a big part of it because it, like you said, it put like me in a different mindset. Although we didn't get the end result that we wanted, the fact that we got over there and we pushed right to the end, and like the stories we got out of it.
Oh
And
yeah.
for me, I've never been like, I have yet to be challenged as hard as a leader than on that. And in my head, I still play like the things that I could have done better and the things that I would do better if I had another shot at it. But obviously that's not in the cards. But you know, it was like the best leadership training you could possibly have ever done. And like every one of you guys was just like, the team was so critical because you guys all were like dialed in and checked out, even though we were bagged out. It just had such a profound effect on me. So yeah, I feel you on the whole like idea that like that pushed you into a new realm, because when you push yourself to a limit and you surpass it and then you surpass it again, yeah, it does something to your brain, man.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but
Yeah,
it definitely
you gain a whole new level of confidence, and yeah, it does change your brain. Now you realize what you're capable of, right? And yeah, man, that I'll never forget like the amount of suffering, and you know, just I have all those snapshots in my mind of like that whole patrol. And like you said, yeah, for better for worse, you know, we were also the only team there with nobody on the team that had ever done it before. You know, all the other teams we're competing with had done this thing like, you know, several times. But man, what an experience! So like,
Yeah.
be cool to do something like that again one day.
If ever,
know?
yeah, if ever there's like the civilian option, like that would be
Mm-hmm.
incredible. Like, you know what?
Yeah.
When we're all independently wealthy, that's what we'll do. We'll throw
Yeah,
a
we'll
bunch of civvy kit
just go
on, and
back.
it's civvy land, man. We'll just go for it. We'll just go for a walk.
Dude, reunion, I'm down, man. Super down.
Sweet. So Mark, we're about to wrap up, and I want to, you're pretty well learned individual. You read a lot. Why don't you share, you already shared Yuval Harare. I want you to share with the listeners just what you're consuming right now, like whether it's a podcast or books that you think people might want to dig into.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm actually gonna open up my book list, because I've been doing a lot of like Audible these days, because I like to, you know, listen to these books while I'm like shopping or working out or whatever.
Yeah.
So Homo Deus, and he has another one, 21 Lessons for 21st Century. History is the only context you have for understanding your current time. You can't just live in the present and be like, this is how it is. Like, how it is right now needs context for you to understand the greater picture of life. Like, you know, that's what history brings you. So I'm a huge fan of all of his books. And another one that I read recently is Command and Control, and that's also history, but that's a more specific. That's the entire history of like nuclear arms. Essentially, from a command and control just perspective, it's actually, man, middle of the night in like 1982, and this massive H bomb was detonating in Arkansas, and all kinds of shit. And it's a really fascinating book about just systems of command and control in general. So anyone who's got any kind of Cold War history inkling should get on that book. It's
Very
huge.
cool. Very cool. Yeah, the Audible craze, man. Like that and podcasts, because it's consumable whenever, and I love it. So
Yeah, man, you could be getting groceries and you're reading a book. You know, it's a different experience for sure.
yeah, like there's almost like no limits to when you can learn, which for me is incredible. Cool. And last question, dude. Everyone gets asked it. What makes you hard to kill?
Makes me hard to kill. I would say it's my cunning mind. You know, I think I could think my way to success and think my way out of some problems, and maybe also think my way into a good fitness program to keep the body in shape. You know, so yeah.
using the noodle rather than the
Yeah,
fist.
well,
All
look, if
right.
I have to, I got a pretty good shooting package from CP too, so I can hold
Okay.
my own with the rifle and the pistol.
Dude, you're like that guy, right? That's like typical movie character, just sitting behind your desk, doing what you got to do, and then shit hits the fan, and you're like, "It's go time, bros!" And everyone's like, "Who
We're
is this
back.
guy?"
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're pulling out Bowie knives.
Oh yeah.
I love it, man. We're just like these hidden warriors within our society now that can come out at any point when shit gets real. I love it. Dude, it's been awesome to have you on. I'm so pumped that you approached me and you're like, "Hey, I want to get on this bad boy." So, again, many thanks, and I wish you all the best, man. And we're gonna catch up and have some brews later for sure.
Dave, thanks for having me, man. Cheers.
All right, dude. Have a good rest of the day. Peace.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can find out more about training, nutrition, and mindset at davemorrow.net. Be sure to like us on Facebook and Instagram at Dave Morrow PT. And don't forget, strong people are hard to kill.